What's up? What's up? Welcome to FIFO. My boy Sam Nang. We got a special guest today. So before I even tell you what this podcast is about, just want a quick introduction. Philip Wilkerson. We're going to dive into more of who he is. Quite frankly, I don't even know. I think we became friends on Facebook through this podcast. So excited to have a conversation there. But FIFO. So Sam Nang and I haven't talked to each other in years. We connected over some of the content we were sharing on social media. And after our first Zoom call, Sam Nang's like, why don't we just hit record and turn this thing into a podcast? So here we are. We are in episode 11. Podcast gets released every Monday at 6 a.m., Friday at 4 p.m. So we catch you right then and there on your commute. And we go over all sorts of things around personal development, philosophy, business, fitness, you name it, all things that are just trying to make ourselves better humans, and we coach each other in the process. So that being said, today is a special episode because, like I mentioned, Philip is here, and this is our first guest. So hopefully we don't fuck this up. Philip was already telling us at the beginning of the podcast about how he's just going to, peace out on us if we suck too much. So we're already prepared for that. But Sam Nang, you want to jump in and
Well, I knew the first person to ask for our guest who would always raise his hands up, and this is my boy Philip Wilkerson. I've known Philip Wilkerson. He's a good friend of mine. We used to CrossFit together, power lift together, did a lot of lifting and a lot of personal development help as well too. And I think I'm the responsibility or the claim partner of the one that got him to start his own podcast before I even started a podcast.
Oh, nice.
He called it.
What's your podcast, Philip?
Positive Philter.
Yeah.
Positive Philter. Okay.
Oh, I could talk about it a little bit. So the reason Philip was always talking about starting a podcast, and I would egg him on. At that time, I had a YouTube channel, and I was putting some content out. And he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't start it. He would just be like, I'm going to get started. And then I would just keep trolling him. That's what he called it, positively trolling. And then he finally started it. And he's been very successful. I don't know how many episodes you've been on. I periodically jump on here, some nuggets and jump off here and there. But he's been very consistent with it as well, too. And I helped him, or I introduced him to a good friend of mine named Dean Bakari, who was podcasting before podcasting was a thing. Mm-hmm. And he helped Philip Wilkerson out as well too. So it's a good cycle that we've come back, and I'm podcasting, and Philip's helping us out as well and giving his words of wisdom. And his unofficial title is owner of the Positive Philter Podcast, and he is the unofficial mayor of George Mason. And he's one of my good friends. Welcome, Philip Wilkerson, to the episode.
Well, and the funny thing is, Sam Nang was about to say, welcome, Positive Philter, because that's how he trolled me. I tell a lot of people, don't wait to create. And it was a lot of, I hit record and I wouldn't release it, or I would just be, gun shy, whatever you want to call it. And Sam Nang would troll me so bad because the way he would troll me is that he would publicly say, can't wait till the episode comes out, or hey, Positive Philter. He wouldn't call me Philip. He called me Positive Philter for like 6 months. Hey, Positive Philter. Or he would actually, I think I'm on a YouTube video with him. He's like, hey, I'm with my boy, Positive Philter. I'm like, I'm Philip. And it was like, at this point, I think even other people were like, can't wait for your podcast to come out. And I was like, I can't. I had to do it, or I'm full of shit, because publicly I said I was going to do something, and the world kept me accountable, right? So I actually had this idea like December 2016 and sat on it till April 2017. And so that's about 6 months or so of me like, oh, it's not good enough, or it's not that, or I didn't like it. And when I actually listen to it now, it's still cringy to me, right? Like my first episode.
Of course.
But
of course.
I love that it's on wax though, because I can see how more confident I am in my speaking, how confident I'm with you. I'm like, let's rip and run. I'm ready to go. I'm more confident because of just doing it over and over and over. And Sam Nang, I have about 300. I have 340 episodes now over the span
Nice.
of 7 years.
Damn.
Where like,
Yeah.
I don't even get nervous about podcasting anymore, but I had to really reframe that when I help other people. I've worked at George Mason University, and I do work with employers, but sometimes I still get to interact with students. And I've encouraged a lot of students to start podcasts, and I have to reframe it and be very empathetic when they're like being nervous about it, like, oh, just do it. Because it's so hard for me to remember, like when I started, that like I was actually anxious or had a knot in my stomach about like it's a big deal to do a podcast, and now it's not a big deal. So it's crazy. Give yourself time. It's crazy how that
Well,
shit.
I want to pull the thread on that a little, Philip. So okay, so walk me like who let's give us a little more context. Who are you? Like, why did you start a podcast? What's the purpose? You're part. So we got you work at JMU. You're the mayor of JMU, and now you've done 340 episodes on a podcast.
G,
So
you gotta
take
get
me
G.
a little bit.
We're gonna get canceled over here. I'm not no mayor of JMU. No, we went to JMU. I'm the mayor of GMU.
Oh, George. I'm sorry, George Mason.
Mason.
No,
I get it confused. I just get it twisted all the time. Both great institutions. So I work in higher education. I've been working in higher ed for about 10 plus years. And so my job before George Mason, I was actually working for VCU as as a transfer counselor. And
That's where I went.
Yeah, that's where he went. And so
okay.
I went to VCU.
And I wasn't super, motivated, but it was a job. And I used to do these YouTube videos in my car called Random Rambles of Philip Wilkerson. And they weren't very like it was basically me talking to myself, trying to get motivated to go to work. But I would just put the camera in my car and say, "Hey guys, it's Monday." Yada yada. And I was like, "This is boring as hell," because I'm just sitting in my car. And so I heard of these things called podcasts, which is like a radio show. I just wanted to talk. I really didn't care about the vlogging. It's a lot more work, I think, to have a YouTube channel than to have a podcast, because you got to edit and video. It's a lot more
for
there.
Sure.
So I was like, man, I just want to talk. I want to do the radio thing. What's podcasting? And Sam Ning is right. He was like, before podcasting blew up like it was, I just thought of it like a radio show. I wasn't really familiar with what it really was. And he was like, yo, hit up my friend Dean. And I said, okay. Like that part, I'm not shy about. If someone tells me to reach out, that I don't get anxious about that part. And so I reached out, and Dean talked to me for 2 hours. He talked to me for 2 hours, and I wrote down everything, like how to get a hosting site and how to do this and how to do that. And so that's it. But then, fortunately, right after the timeline, the April 2017, and December later in that year, December 2017. I started working at George Mason, where I got my master's at the Career Center. So I work at the Career Center. I help students. I used to help students with their resume, their cover letters, their career development. But then now I switched over. I'm still at George Mason, but now I work in employer relations, where I help employers recruit those students. So I'm there. Okay. I'm all over the place. I advise student groups. I call myself the unofficial mayor because I try to talk to everybody. I lead a Black male faculty and staff employer resource group. I just really try to connect with as many people as I can. That's why I call myself the unofficial mayor of Mason.
Yeah.
Nice, man.
I got a good question for you. Since you've been podcasting for a little bit now, I've noticed that it's had like a great impact on like your personal life and professional life as well too. Can you talk a little bit about like how that kind of ties into how like putting yourself out there kind of helps that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of people need to understand that even when you have a creative endeavor like podcasting or anything that's creative, that there's professional skills that overlap. So because of podcasting, I became a better listener, actually, where I listen better at work. I listen, when I'm interviewing others, I'm making sure like you're doing, Sam Nang, I'm taking notes. I actually do have a notebook where I listen to my guest, and it's really made me really actively listen. So I became a better interviewer and a better moderator of conversations at work. I don't have a background in communications or media, but it's allowed me new skills where I had to learn how to use Audacity to edit or learn about hosting sites, or just new skill sets in regards to technology. And then I think just straight up professional confidence. Like,
Yeah.
I was like, if I figure I can talk to an invisible audience of like, I don't know how many people listen. Some episodes 50, some people 100, some episodes 1,000. I try to picture in my mind, like, if I could do that virtually, I can talk to an audience of 500, whatever more in person, which I've done. And so it's transferred into me being confident in public speaking. So
Yeah.
I really
I love
think it
that.
has had a lot of growth in regards to just this creative endeavor has allowed a lot of other things. And then one thing I'd like to share too is that it's allowed me to have access to people that I normally would not have access to
Mm-hmm.
in regards
Yeah.
to networking. So if I try to go to talk to someone of notoriety, I'm like, hi, my name is Philip. And they're like, okay, who gives a shit? I'm like, all right, see you later. But if I'm like, hi, I'm Philip, I have a podcast. I'd love for you to be a guest. Sometimes I've gotten guests to be on my podcast that'll be people that are notable. Like I've had the
Right.
president of Mason. I've had the president of my fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha. I've had just people that have given me access to their time because I have a podcast or some form of media. So it's also expanded my network for sure.
Man,
Yeah.
I love that. I mean, I totally agree, and you got my brain spinning on a lot of different things. I think the first one is I don't know if you follow Alex Hormozy. I know Sam Ning does. We both follow him pretty closely, but he posted a clip yesterday that I thought was fascinating, right? And it was like, when we think about our decision, we often think about it as this huge body of water that as soon as we step into it, we're going to drown. But what we don't realize is that body of water is an inch deep, and we can keep moving around and walking through it, right? So it's about just getting started. And it's so true, man. I know I even for myself, like I still struggle with it today. Like if I have a big task, if it's an administrative task in my business or something of that nature, like I will 100% procrastinate
Yeah.
on that decision. And then once I start it, I'm like, oh, this isn't that bad. This isn't like,
Yeah.
okay, but yeah, I can do this. Yeah, okay. Why didn't I just start this earlier, right? So I think that that's one piece of it. And then the other part so I definitely respect you for getting in starting. And I think a lot of people struggle with that, right? Like just starting. And I preach about it all the time. I know Sam Ning does too. And I don't know what it is about us as a human, species and race that we just all like think it's so like this big crazy thing to go just start dipping our toes in the water and get started on things. But I highly encourage. I mean, Philip, you're a great success story of that.
Well, I think I know what it is.
Self-consciousness.
It's the iceberg effect where people that get started in something always look at the people that are already successful and they only see the end result of that other person's success. So they think that they have to start off and be perfect or whatever. But they like when I say iceberg, they don't see the journey that person had to suck. Like that
Right.
person had to get better. I love blooper videos. Like when you see and social media has exacerbated this, right? You see someone, they're already fast. You see someone, they're already maxing out at the gym. So I don't want to start working at the gym because I'm working with my little 25s and I see a guy on YouTube that's like deadlifting 575, which was my max. I just feel like dropping that in there.
Yeah.
But like people don't see the journey. And so when you get started, you're like, damn, like I'm already not good enough, or this is going to be hard, or everyone's already better than me. Everyone that we see in my circle is already better than me. And I'm like, no, like, that's why I say, I even on my own say, I send my first episode to people.
Yeah, you got
listen to this. Listen
Philip,
to my first episode.
It's a perception of the self, of like having to be perfect or anything. And then like starting, you actually develop those skills. I think we all started very similar where we just, what's the quickest way to get our message out? And it doesn't matter if your grammar is incorrect. Like my grammar was terrible. It just got better as I started speaking, and the speaking ability just gets better, and even writing and even taking like photos and stuff. So it's like, it's never perfect. Even now it's like never perfect or anything. So but it's being like very self-conscious of like how other perceive you and how it's gonna look. But if you actually just start and just work, most of the people that will they look at it, they're like, they wouldn't even know. Like, I stutter and say things wrong all the time, and then that, for me, it's like that. The little small things shouldn't keep you from sharing your message. If your message is inspiring, it's creative, or getting somebody to like move and stuff. And that's what I was trying. I think we all started almost in the same place, like ramblings. I had daily beast motivation. That's what I used to call it, on Instagram. But then, it evolves into something else, and that's how we should be as a person too. As our personal development growth is, the more content we share, the more knowledge we get, the more information, the more we're doing it. Like, I call you on the podcast because you were like, I knew you were in rhythm. You were already talking about personal development. You were already talking about podcasts and stuff, and then like jumping on it and doing it. It's like I speak daily as well too, and now it's like, okay, I get very anxious and nervous sometimes. Like, oh my god, maybe I don't have enough stuff to talk about on the podcast. I'm one of those person, like, I don't hesitate. I do, but then I say yes to a lot of things and creatively, and then I kind of get very overwhelmed at times. There's times where like I do get overwhelmed, and that's part of the process, the learning process of yourself as well too. When you just start and do something, or you do something that's outside your comfort zone, you start to learn a lot more of what you're capable of and the type of skills that you get. But yeah,
And man in the arena. I think that's one of my favorite quotes by Theodore Roosevelt is "Man in the arena," and it's a whole thing. But the main thing is like the critic. It's like I listen to the doer, right? The man that's in the arena, bloody and marred. Like at least if he fails dare. Was it he fails daringly or something like that? Well, the point is that it's very easy for critiques and critics to give you that feedback on the sideline
yeah,
and say, oh, you're doing it wrong, or you're doing it wrong. But it's very like in the moment, like if I'm gonna fail, at least I tried. I'm not, oh yeah, at least I don't die with those timid souls, right? Like I'm doing it. And so I mean, I'm not joking. I actually say that when I get really nervous. I say, man, I actually quote "Man in the arena" to myself, especially when I do speaking in front of a lot of people, because it is nerve wracking. But then I look at the
yeah,
audience, I'm like, it was funny. I say like half these people can't do the shit that I can do. And
yeah,
in a cocky way, like a chip on my shoulder, like they can't go up on here and talk in front of everybody. I'm the
yeah,
man in the arena, and I do take advice. I actually take advice more seriously from other speakers, or like Dean Picard. If he was like, "Hey, this is my friend. He gonna give you advice about podcasts," and I'm like, "Does he have one?" I'm like, "I don't know if I really want it." Like, sorry. But the fact is, when you said Dean, he's been podcasting since podcasting. I was like, yeah, I want to talk to him because I know that he would know how it felt, or he would, if he gave me any criticism, his criticism would be valid because he'd be like, I did this too, or you can get better. So I definitely listen. I listen 2 times more to someone that gives me feedback, constructive feedback, when it's someone that's done it. It's always better to have a football coach when you knew you played football.
yeah,
Like,
And I think there's also something to be said on that too, right? In the sense, and this is something I experienced in my life, right? As far as getting started and the challenges of that, and then finding the right mentors. So I had a friend group when I was in Oregon, and I realized we had this group text thread, right? This is like late 20s. We're all like graduating from our 20s into our 30s, right? So we're all kind of coming into adulthood at that point, truly. Like we were still kids, in my opinion. And I realized that this group of friends, we would shit on each other for any success. So if you were part, like it's true, it was very toxic. So Philip, if you were part of that group and you were like, I'm going to start a podcast, the overarching group would probably be like, oh, why would you do that? You're going to fail. You're going to sound
yeah,
stupid. What are you going to talk about? Da, 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 da. Like that's the way that it was. And then if you failed at something, it's celebrated. It got celebrated. We would celebrate it, right? So like if you started the podcast and you're like, oh, I backed out, I'm not going to do it, then we would all come behind you and be like, see, we told you couldn't do it, man. Just stick with what you're doing. Don't do that. And that was the culture. And it took me until I met my now wife. And as we moved away from them and I looked at the culture that I was a part of, and I deleted the friend group. I was like, dude, I'm out. I'm out of this text thread.
yeah,
Like, I'm done. I recognized it. And then for a moment, I felt very like very, very lonely in that process as I started focusing on my own thing. And then all of a sudden that friend group came back and they're like, after I've reached a certain level of success, and they're like, oh, we knew you could crush this stuff. Like, did you? But it was one of those things, man, that I think a lot of us have this network. Sometimes, at least for me, it was that I had this group of people and this group of toxicity around me that I didn't even realize I was a part of. It was the norm. It was the norm to hate and to shit on things. And that made it very hard to break out. And then I personally did not have a mentor at that point that could help guide me, someone that's done it before where I could take the advice. So I had to actively go search for that. And the way that I searched for that was by taking each step and sucking at what I did and putting my hand up and being like, yeah, I suck. I know I suck. Someone help me. Right.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to stop sucking. And it's the same idea. Like, I think if we look at it like in sports, let's say you decide to pick up golf for the first time and everybody's nervous to go out and play golf because you've never really played before, right? You just know you're going to suck, and that's okay. And the people that know that they're bringing you with to go play it for the first time know that you're going to suck. So suck and do it again and do it again. And if you put up your hand and say, I just want to get better, the people that have done it naturally are going to reach an arm out and give you an olive branch and be like, yeah, let me walk you through it a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think, that's one part of it, man. At least you got to look at the norm of the folks that you're around. And if that's like, there's so many people that talk about this and I've saw it firsthand on my end, but it's like, if you're around a group of people that are holding you back, regardless of where you're at, you got to be able to recognize that you don't have to live up to that persona. You don't have to live up to that narrative.
Yeah.
Right.
I got a good point I want to express or get across as well too. And if anybody that's looking to kind of like step outside the comfort zone, start to do something that's a little bit different, that social pressure, is big. And I talk about it like alcohol and social pressure and everything. It's not so much the alcohol that holds people back. I think it's more of the social pressure that you lose when you're stepping outside and you want to grow. So and that feeling of like losing friends is real, because you lose a group of friends that when you're trying to do something and grow, you could still see their Facebook posts, you could still see people talking about it, and you still get the invites and stuff. But that's the biggest hurdle. But the thing that people, I think, like I always like say is like, when you step outside of this, there will be other people that will help you, that will support you. Like, it's surprising, like Dean has helped me as well to build my coaching website and build the coaching courses. And he didn't help me with the podcast, but like, I knew about podcasting already, but like, I want to report back to him like, hey, look, this is what your support and your coaching did. And he did exactly like what Philip did. He's a very highly paid guy, and I respect his time too. So I try to make it as valuable as possible. But he spent like 2 or 3 hours with me, helping me with my coaching website and everything. And the honest truth is, like, Danny knows it and Philip knows it, and I know this, that successful people want to help other people as well too. But we don't know who to help, because we're in our aspect of like helping ourselves and helping our community as well too. But if somebody reaches out to me, hey, I need some help with like digital marketing or podcasting or creation and stuff, I'd be like, here, da 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 da. And if you want to talk to me later, like, here where you can find me and stuff. So I'm always around, and that kind of stuff. Like, it's good for business. I think it's good for everyone. And we're looking at things that are beneficial for everyone and stuff. People are going to gravitate towards things that are beneficial and helping them grow and stuff too. And in the process of helping us grow, they grow, right? To me, like, podcasting and expressing myself, it's a form of like self-expression, self-therapy, self-actualization. So it makes me happy at this end of the day, at the same time putting out content.
Well, yeah, and I was making a scrunch face. Because I just, it just reframed my blessing. I don't think I had like that many people in my life that were doing that. Like, shout out to my friends. My best friend Hillard. Like, when I was saying I was nervous, rather, like if you look back at my podcast, I was like, man, I don't want to do this by myself. I'm nervous. He's like, I'll be your guest. And my first 5 episodes is my best friend just talking. And the only reason why we couldn't be my co-host, not because we fell out, it's just that we just couldn't get our schedule aligned. He was like, Phil, I think you should just keep on recording without me. I think you got it now.
Yeah.
But he was like, let's do it together. And he helped me, like, and he just was like, he's like, I remember he was like, let's just have a conversation with me and you. And we just talked like normal. And I was like, okay. And then I started reaching out to other people to be my guest on my show. But he gave me that confidence. And even, I joke, hashtag prayers for Maggie, my wife, she puts up with a lot of shit that I do. But, she even is like, she is the type of person that gives me the real authentic feedback I need. Like, did you plan it out? Are you good? But she's never even, I didn't, as I think about it, she's never like, no, you're not going to be good at it. She's just more like, you need to prepare more. She's like, she's stricter with me. She's like, if you're really serious about it, do this, this, and this. And so even her support, sometimes she gives me the rough truth. Like, that wasn't the best. I know you could do better. I'm like, damn. Like, everyone else is like, I get people that gas me up. Like, Maggie's like, I don't know, man. I know you could have done better, right? She gives me like that real advice. But it was never, she was never like, you can't do it. She was always like, you could do whatever you want to do, And so
that's who you want in your corner, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I love what you said too. Like, the thing is, though, we all have a innate sense that we want to belong. We all want to belong. Mm-hmm. So when we have to do things that are self-isolating, it's against our human nature of belonging, right? Like, we all want to be a part of a group, a family, a community. And so when you do things, as you said, that are against the community, you're like, oh man, I'm outcasted from the community. I think what you both realize, though, is there's a billion people in the world that is like, you're going to attract a new community. Yeah. So like, if I put myself out there and I lose that friend group, right, digitally, which is crazy, you're going to start getting Facebook messages. I like what you're doing, this. Okay. And you start getting pulled into another community where you belong. Because I don't know, we just don't do things in isolation. Right. You start joining podcast groups and podcast Facebook groups, and you start giving advice to other people. So like, whoever's out there, like, when you're doing, well, like you said, like the drinking thing, like, I'm not drinking no more on my friend group. But then there's a large community of people that say, I don't like to drink, right? There's always a group to join because we don't drink, or that's not my thing. I'm getting fitness. Oh, why you think you want to get all, fit and all that? There's groups. Like, you can find a community no matter what. I think it's just that initial step of losing one that was comfortable, losing a group of friends that was readily available. That is scary. And so having the empathy, like, that is hard, but also understanding that when you put yourself out there, I don't know, what is it, law of attraction, magnet, you're going to attract people to what you're doing, like, randomly, like random ass people too. Like, I don't even know who you are. They're like, I love what you're putting out there. And you're like, who are you? Because you're going to draw people that are attracted to the momentum that you're putting out there, the other things. So I love your story, Danny. That was hard. I could see that being hard, especially if you have 10 plus years with these friends. That's that was your community. You know what I'm saying?
It was part of it was letting go of myself, right? Like, of letting go of my old self. And like, it was kind of like, the idea of the chrysalis going into the butterfly, right? And I was realizing I'm taking myself to the next place, the next level. And I want to hit on something else with you. I want to ask you, Philip. So, because there's another part to this, right? So one part, I think, like, we already kind of hit the nail on the head on, is just starting. And that's such a hard part for a lot of folks. But then there's the other part that's keep going, right? And that's the other part that most people that do start drop off. And I've done it before. I've dropped off. We had a vlog with my family. Like, it was like we called it New Family Dream. We did it back in, like, I don't know, 5 years ago. And I think back, like, I dropped off because it was just taking too much time to edit. I was taking like 20 hours a day editing some of these videos that were like 7 minutes long. And money wasn't there. Like, it was great family memories, but money wasn't there. And then now I look back at it, and my family will watch those videos to this day. My kids love it. And I'm like, man, if we had just kept going, right? Like maybe it would have been a YouTube family, but do I want to be a YouTube family? And like, so on and so forth. But the other part of this, right, is I want to hear from your story, Philip. So you started the podcast. How many episodes did you get in before you had that first feeling of like, man, fuck this, I'm done. I don't want to do this.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I read a statistic when I first started too. It was like most podcasts die within the first 6 months or first 10 episodes. And so in my mind, I was like, I'm making it past that. I don't know. I'm a chip on my shoulder kind of guy. I was like, I'm at least make it past 6 months and I'm going to make it past 10 episodes. So I had that. And then the first year, I started in April. I was doing pretty good consistently. And then I pledged Alpha during that time. And so I was like, I couldn't podcast, so I was pledging. So I was like, my idea was as soon as I cross and I become an Alpha, remember Alpha Phi Alpha, I'm going to start again. So that was a break. And then when I first started my job, I was like really overwhelmed. And so I was like, let me take 3 months off. And that was the window where I was like, I could just stop. And that would have been like 20 episodes in or keep going. And I heard this great advice. Someone told me was like, well, if it's something that you want to do, you can always just take breaks, like season breaks, and come back. So I started implementing that to keep me going, right? And so it was forced, like kind of like, rest days for lifting weights, right? Like I had to force myself to take a break to recover, and that would give me the momentum to keep going, knowing that like, sometimes I couldn't be consistent. Like, I was doing 1 episode a week, and I was like, I'm not getting it out there like that. So when I heard that philosophy that like I can schedule breaks, recoup, gather myself, it's on my own timeline. I could tell the audience I'll be back in 6 months. Like I dictate my schedule. I dictate my release schedule. I was like, that's freeing. Like, you just keep them informed, say, I'll come back. But then the thing is, Danny, I had to hold myself to it. Like, again, like Sam Ning made me do, like, if I said, I'll be back in 6 months, then I better be back in 6 months, right? Like, so that was the kind of thing. That's the way that kept me going. And those are those mini breaks where I got overwhelmed. If I got overwhelmed, I would publicly to myself and to the public, I would say, hey, I'm on a break. Life is intense. I got a lot of classes or something like that with school. I'm going back to school. I'll be back in 6 months. But then if I'm going to hold myself, I made it public that I'm coming back, that I have to be accountable. I'm accountable to myself and accountable to this random audience. I don't even know if I have listeners. I'm like, listeners, I'll be back. People they can be like, who gives a shit if you come back or not? But in my mind, I was like, they're counting on me, so that's what helps me with breaks and momentum. You know what I'm saying?
Well, I think so have you seen Stutz? It's a Netflix special with Jonah Hill.
Is that the counselor when he was getting therapy?
Yeah, when he was going through therapy.
I gotta watch some of it. I've seen a little bit of it.
It's pretty good. If you haven't watched it, I recommend all you guys, whoever's listening, watch it. Stutz. It's on Netflix. It's STUTZ. But Jonah Hill makes a quote in there that I absolutely love. It's like one of my favorites. And he talks about don't commit the second failure, right? And the whole idea around it is, regardless of what you're doing, quitting drinking, working out, podcasts, whatever it is, right? You're going to start something, and at some point, inevitably, you're going to slip up. You're going to have a drink, or you're going to skip working out, or you're going to put a pause on the podcast, whatever it is. That's the first failure. That's to be expected, and that's okay. Don't beat yourself up over it. Don't get upset. Don't make it into a big thing. But then just keep going. Pick back up and keep going where you're going. Never commit the second failure. The second failure is so you stop doing the habit or whatever it is. And then the second failure is you then saying, I'm done. I can't do it. I failed. Right. Yeah. And the second failure is literally that communication back to yourself saying, I failed. I'm done. Yeah. So I always find that so interesting, right? It's like we're human beings. We have lives and things are going to new jobs, new careers, whatever the case is. Mm-hmm. Just don't never keep going in the sense of like you're going to commit the first failure, and that's okay. You're going to have a pause. Just know that that's okay. but then pick back up. And the other piece to that I think is really interesting in what you did, because I definitely can relate. The whole reason why I even started sharing content on social media was accountability for myself, right? I was quitting drinking, I was working out, and I was just storing it every day. And I was just like, I hate the world. Here I am. I'm doing it. And I'm like, fuck, now I got to go do it. And I started having people reach out to me, like random people that I hadn't talked to in forever. And the one that really kind of opened my eyes was a friend that I knew from a long time ago, hadn't talked to her in forever. And she was like, hey, I just want you to know your social media content, what you just put out, is the number 2 reason I just left my husband. And I was like, oh, fuck, what did I do? What did I say? And she was like, no. She's like, the number 1 reason is I've been living in an abusive relationship for a long time and I haven't like owned up to that. And you helped motivate me to just finally leave. I got an Airbnb and I left, and now I'm out of this abusive relationship. And I've spoke with her since, and she's doing much better in her life, right? And it's like, wow, like that's crazy to me that, you know, that one message, like, it has an impact on somebody. And that's when I realized, like, this thing isn't, like, at least for me and what I'm doing, it's not about amassing a huge audience that, you know, I mean, if the people are interested, great. I'm not going to be like turning it down, but that's not like my message, like, or my mission, right? I'm not trying to be an influencer. I'm not trying to do any of this stuff. I'm just trying to put out positive information. And that's one of the reasons why, like, I really like what Sam Nang brought together to this podcast, which is raising the collective vibrations, right? It's the idea of like, okay, raising the collective vibrations. If I can put out positivity out there, and that just helps one person for that moment, it doesn't have to change their life. It'd be one little sliver of moment that just helps them pick up, and they're like, you know what, I am going to go do my thing.
Philip,
great. That's it, man.
Vibrations are.
Yeah, I mean, no, I definitely understand vibrations, and I actually do listen. You know, like thinking about the energy you carry and karma and all the different things, and like low vibration people, like people that just walk in the room and just suck out energy, and then people that like radiate energy. I don't know. I thought I always radiate energy because I'm loud, but point is, it's not just because I'm loud. It's that, like, you're right. Like I've seen it in spaces where, for sure, their presence is felt as someone that like just lifts the morale at everybody. I've seen it, you know, like you've seen it in sports, and I didn't know that was called vibration or anything like that, but they radiate energy. They are leaders. Sometimes they lift other people up without being loud and vocal, but you can see how they carry themselves, how they uplift other people. And I've seen people that you know them, the energy vampires that like that are just like pessimistic, cynical, that way, or they're also energy vampires where they're just like they're mean spirited, they're rude. You know, there's multiple ways to be energy sucker. Like there are people like I don't want to share my ideas with them because they're always going to shit on them, like those kind of people, or they're you know, So I definitely know about the vibrations and that stuff, but and to your point, I never thought of it when I was still doing it. I was like, you know, it's a positive filter. One, I was just trying to uplift myself. I'd be totally egocentric and say like I wanted to motivate myself. And then when it turned into an interview show, I just wanted to have conversations with people that I trusted and people that I wanted to get their advice on wax. Because then what I do is I listen to it. My father-in-law passed away from cancer in 2012. And this sounds really eerie, but I still listen to the episode that I recorded with him at least monthly, maybe even more, just to hear his voice and just to be around him. Because physically, when he was here, he was my mentor. He was my friend. He was a guy that gave me a lot of good advice in life. So I'm so glad that I had a medium to record him for me. Like, honestly, for me, and that sounds bad. Like, I know we're supposed to be doing this to uplift other people, but that's soul filling for me. Or the episode I listened to a lot over and over and over again is the one I did with my own dad. You know, my dad was one of the first Black students at VMI. And it's so weird. In life, he walks around like nothing. I could do anything. But that was the first time my dad told me, like, and he's like visibly to a whole audience, that he was scared about failure and he cried and he was scared to fail VMI and go back home. He ain't never told me that, but he told people on a podcast. So I listened to that one over again to be like, yeah, even someone I look up to, like my dad, that's really tough, he was scared of failure. And I listened to that one over and over and over again. And so for me, I listen to this and I always say this: if I can put this and it fills me up and someone else, like you said, benefits from this, that's a bonus. I never went into starting this podcast with the mindset of amassing an audience or having all this X, Y, and Z. Every time someone says, hey, you helped me, or hey, I like this, or hey, this, this was really informational, that's a bonus. I wasn't going into it with that expectation. I was going in with it like, this is something for me to make myself better. But if this also makes others better, that's dope. That's just like an unexpected consequence, and I'll take it. Right? I'll receive it and I'll take it, and I'm gonna keep on having that mindset. If it's 1 to 1,000, or 1 to a lot of people, if someone gets a benefit from it, that's a bonus.
Yeah.
And I go in that with public speaking. You go to a whole audience, talk to 500 people. I've done this. 500 people, not all 500 are listening to you, but it's that one that comes after the presentation and said, thank you so much. Can we stay in touch? Like, that's not a really good yield if you think about it in business terms, right? 1 out of 500. But in Philip Wilkerson yield, that's dope. I did it. I made it. You know what I'm saying? Look, I made it. You know what I'm saying? And so I love that philosophy, right? Like that mindset of 1 to 100, it don't matter. If you help somebody, that's a bonus. That's an extra, that's icing on the cake. That should be enough fuel. That is usually a fuel for me to keep going. That extra little nuggets of bonuses. Like if I heard that young lady's story that you just said, that would have gave me enough juice to content for like 6 more months, a year. Because I was like, wow, I really changed someone's life. That's juice right there. That gives me some positive juice.
100%, man. And it's that growing in public, right? Like I think that's what's interesting is like when especially, and it's not like if folks that are interested in doing something like this, right? Like you mentioned, I'm doing this publicly, and I'm ultimately doing it for me to become better, right? Better speaker, better, get over some of my fears, work on my discipline, all these things that I'm working on myself, a public record of myself, with my dad, things of that nature. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? And like I think what people gravitate to that is the fact that you are growing in public and that you are putting out challenges and you are overcoming things and that you are, like they're interested in the story, right? And that's like that's like a pretty popular trend right now across a lot of different fronts of this growing in public piece of it, where we're opening up our personal lives to the world and letting the world kind of give us feedback on it. And I think if you have that right guiding light in that process, which is I'm going to get over this to accomplish one of my fears, my challenges, or I'm going to document this part of my journey, whatever it is that you're focusing on, naturally, like you said, Philip, you're going to gravitate other people. And then as soon as one person puts their hand up and says, thank you, just thank you.
Yeah.
It's a ton of juice.
It's a real feeling. I always talk about it. It's the contribution part, and it makes you feel very happy and very fulfilled. Like people that have very happy, fulfilling lives, like my dad, for example, like all his friends look up to him, and he like mentors them and like teaches them. He's not on social media, but he's part of the communities and stuff. One point I wanted to talk about that I learned from Philip. Philip is big on. I've learned from him. He talks about the pivot, like in sports and stuff, where like. Once we were starting to like put ourselves out there and it's uncomfortable, and then there's things like that kind of like change our like ideas. Like first I started YouTubing, and like Danny, I was very similar. It was like it took a lot of work to edit and everything, and the quality of it and the yield, everything. So I started pivoting towards Instagram. And then even when I was starting to like really like I was going through a lot of like mental health problems, so I wasn't putting out like I don't think I was putting out the quality content that I should have had, but I didn't want to like speak or anything. So I still wanted to be able to express myself. So I started writing more on like Instagram. So it was just more like my thoughts. It was just more like I was like tweeting and stuff. So, but at the end of the day, like when we all come back at it, we're all it's a part of like self-expression, right? Podcasting, we're expressing our thoughts, we're starting our expressing our feelings and our experiences, right? That in ourselves make us feel inside very fulfilled, and that feeling of making a difference, to me, yeah, I was addicted when I first started putting more content out. I was always like taking videos of like lifting, but I started putting more personal development content out. And similar to you guys, like I have a lot of guys, a lot of friends that are like, hey, I really like what you're doing. And then it becomes very like, hey, this is, and I almost changed my identity around it. And that's what like personal development is. You actually become your voice, you become your philosophy, you become this person. And when you get really into it and stuff, that is who you are and stuff. And that's when you start to attract people that want authenticity. You know, high vibrational folks are truly authentic. They're the ones that figured out like, I guess my message has shifted in the beginning when I started doing like my personal development. It evolved into something more. When I was first starting off in personal development, it was like productivity, goal setting, and everything. And then now it's kind of evolved into like spirituality and a little bit more of like dark psychology. So it's evolved. And as the process of putting more stuff out there and trying to keep content fresh, you're in yourself growing, and people could see that. And as people see me growing and everything, and my message is like, look, you have untapped human potential that I've learned how to somehow do. And like I want to share the message. You know, it's cool, it's neat, you know, it's not for everyone. And I learned that through a long time. It's not for everyone. Like spirituality is not for everyone, and personal development is not for everyone. So learning how to be able to like pivot, and learning how to be okay with people not following you on your journey, like or wanting to be on your journey, you know. In my head, I'm like, dang, this is the best fucking advice. When I spit it out, I was like, everybody's gonna jump on this, but you know, it doesn't happen like that. So, but there are those few people that I know they're listening and they enjoy it, and I think they find sometimes comfort in the voice. So, but yeah, dude, like I'm glad to have you on a podcast. I knew you were the right first guest for us.
Yeah, and it's also like at the same time, right? Like as you say, you pivot and you grow and you put yourself out there and think about thoughts. It's like at the same time, I really want to get back to the root. Is like you, you still be like you're still doing it for yourself. And I know that sounds like a very like even when you help others, and like there's a sense of altruism. You're still doing it for yourself. Like you feel purpose, feeling helpful,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
So there is still a ego attached to help. You know, being a servant to someone else, you still feel a purpose, and so it's okay to say like, I like hearing that I help someone. That is okay. You know, we should say
Right.
you want to help selflessly. I mean, that's everyone, right? Like you should be a thankless helper, but at the same time, there's reasons why awards and recognition works. Think
Right.
about it, right? If someone's like we are very humanistic, if someone says, "Hey, you did a good job. I like what you did." What do we do psychologically? We do it again because we like
Yeah.
that feeling, right? Right? And
It,
so it is good. It is good to do that. And then like it's okay to say, I personally words, love language, words of affirmation, that's mine. If someone says I did a good job, I'm juiced up and I do that same thing over and over again because I like the feeling of being acknowledged and recognized. I've Give me awards. I love it. That's me. Other people are acts of service, right? Like they like when someone just does something for them. Clean the house. That's my wife. So if I clean the house without her asking, she loves that. Acts of service. But it's okay. and I love that you said your dad gets that, right? When you mentor other people, I love mentoring people because for me, I love seeing my mentees be successful. That is my almost visible words of affirmation, right? Like that's
Right.
they're doing it. That person I helped them is doing it, right? Like I'm jumping on their coattails. They're doing it, and I contributed to that, right? Like that makes me feel
Yeah.
good. And so think about that. It's okay to have a purpose to help others and feel good when you actually do it.
100%. I can't agree more with that, man. And I got one last thing for you because I know
Yeah.
we're coming up to time.
Yeah.
So, future Philip, tell me about. So, I always like to say this even with my customers. So, I got the big red easy button here. Okay.
Yeah.
You can push it and you can fast forward to, let's put it out 3 years. I won't make it too challenging. So,
All
3
right.
years out. Okay. All things go exactly how you want them to go. And now you're fast forward 3 years forward in time and you're talking back to telling us where you're at today. So what's future Philip look like in 3 years? Where are you at?
I already crossed the 40 mark, so I'm washed, I guess. Washed out, I don't know. I put a dent in my PhD program. Obviously I won't be finished in 3 years, but I knocked out some more classes. I became I'm more efficient in research and more, I can have those conversations more comfortably and also know what I'm doing a little bit in that arena of academia. More so, I think about 3 years ago, like 3 years from now, the life as a father. My boys are growing up, right? And they're playing new activities. And so I'm really thinking about what they're involved in. I'm still in this house in Fairfax. The house is better. Oh, I'm better at house stuff because I don't know what the hell I'm doing with all this like maintenance. So I'm more comfortable with maintenance and fixing things. And then I think one of the main things too is that I'm a better, more prepared public speaker. That is something I guarantee that I want to be in 3 years, where I'm actually in front of large audiences consistently with a presence, with confidence, um, shoulders up, chest up, just commanding rooms.
You should start lifting again.
Yeah, I should start lifting again. I still got the shoulders, you know what I'm saying?
Get back in the weight room.
Yeah, get back in the weight room.
Still when you got big shoulders and stuff, big chest.
Big chest, big legs. I have big legs. My pants are tight. And and then also, like I said, 3 years, my wife and I are very happy. Everyone around me is doing well. My mother-in-law is doing well. And, just the home that we created here is just a happy home. That's something that's really important to me. That's what I think in 3 years. And I'm not burnt out and I'm not trying to do too much, which I'm doing right now. I'm actually prioritizing. I'm better at prioritizing what's important, family, school, and work, better than what I'm doing right now, where I'm in a better system and not trying to be all to everybody. But I'm excited. Each year I write a letter to myself. So you gave me motivation for at least this year because I forgot to do it this year. But each year I get better. So thank you.
That's awesome, man. Last question for you on my end, and then same thing if you want to wrap up with anything. But any book recommendations? You have any books that you recommend out there to the world that you're actively reading right now?
Yeah, I think I'm actively reading. I left them upstairs. I suck at titles. Well, I'm reading also 92 Tips on How to Talk to Anybody, which is funny. You're like, Philip, why do you need that? Well, I don't. But it's actually nuanced. Like, it's like turned into a science, how you can talk to anybody. And I'm like, dang. The funny part is that I'm already doing that. And two, like the other one's like, wow, I could do that better. So it's 92 ways to talk to anybody. Another book that is really quick read that I just finished was Career Coach Chat GPT. And it's about how you can use Chat GPT for your career development, like upload finesse your resume and all that, but like thoughtfully, right? Not just copying, like how you can actually use the algorithms and AI to really revamp your resume to get you an interview and prepare for your career. That's one I just read. And I'm actually reading the How to Make Friends by Dale Carnegie, the old classic one. Those are 3 books that I read books kind of like Sam Nang says, where I don't read them cover to cover. Sometimes I just put a bookmark, open it randomly, read a page and close it. So I rotate like that. So sometimes I just read a random chapter. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I like that, especially for the 92 tips. I just open to another random tip and read that tip for the day. It's a good
You'll
one.
like this one. So I got one. Do you follow Tim Ferriss at all?
Yes. I read his Tribe of Mentors book.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say, have you seen Tools of Titans?
No, I guess check that one out too.
It's a huge book, but I think you'll really appreciate this, Philip. So what he basically did is he took, I don't know, he's got to have like 80 podcasts in there of all these like amazing folks, and he compiled it down to like the Cliff Notes version that you can just flip through and just grab random stories, random tidbits. The whole thing's meant to not read cover to cover. It's literally meant to just flip open to a page, grab a nugget, keep going, right? But it's pretty fascinating. That's a good one that I started picking around. So that's something that that's my nightly read.
Yeah.
Love it.
I think books are great. I think even if you don't like the physical books, sometimes like when I first started getting into books, I did a lot of Audible. You gotta have,
Roll.
Yeah, I
yeah,
gotta
Audible.
So I
Yeah.
gotta head out,
All right.
guys. Before my
Okay,
wife.
Hey,
we appreciate you. I'll give you a.
Philip, thank you for being on, man.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right, bye.
Nice to meet you. Enjoy.
Hey, bye-bye.
All right, so that was Philip Wilkerson, and he's a good friend of mine. We've been longtime friends, and in the personal development space, I'm very proud of him as well too. He continues to grow and continues to uh, be his genuine, corny self and high vibrational, positive self. Even though he goes through all the same struggles as we do, like I struggle, we struggle all together, and we share our struggle. So that's kind of what keeps us together, and we're always like positively trying to help each other in a way. And I do admire that guy for his level of tenacity to do things and just get after it. But
Yeah, he was awesome, man. I love his energy. And for those of you remember to give his podcast listen. Positive Filter, right?
yeah, the Positive Filter Podcast and Philip Wilkerson. We could put on the show notes, but he's on Instagram and he has a podcast that he's been doing for a long time. It's very he's in the academic world and everything. I'm in kind of in the biohacking and personal development field. So people that if the message resonates and hits, follow his podcast. That's typically how like podcasting work is when we have people of similar values on our episode, and if you like them, go give them a follow, because that's how I find influencers and people that I like in the personal development space that I want to learn more. If I'm listening to somebody that I normally listen to and then a guest jumps on there, that I like their message, I'll go into their website, I go into their Instagram or whatever, and then just kind of continue on with the continuation of like learning and stuff. So that's kind of how having guests and podcasting, I think, works. I'm pretty sure Danny could add a little bit more to it, but that was kind of my summation of like why we want to have podcast guests on our community as well too, because it helps them grow, it helps us grow as well to get a bigger outreach, because Philip will share this episode with his community as well too, and he has a whole website that has appearances of guests that he's been on different episodes as well too, so it's like a synergistic feeling.
Yeah, I think, and for me, one of my key takeaways from what he said that I think is so relevant, and that's that. And I've been thinking about this for a long time in my life, right? And that's selfishness versus selflessness.
Yeah.
And how he's like, look, I'm doing this, but I'm doing this for me. And even if that means that, I'm either putting myself out there and holding myself accountable so I can become better. And then the process, if that helps somebody, it's a bonus and it just juices me up and I get those words of affirmation, right? And I think that that's something that, I definitely see with what we're doing too, right? Like I've come out of these things and I'm feeling more motivated for the day. I got a new lens on that. Maybe you threw something out there. I feel better woo woo around me, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm more motivated. Like I've since we started talking, like I don't know if I would have made the decision to go with a chiropractor to fix my posture so I can get into a better shape, right? If it wasn't because we were talking. So there's a lot of things like that I think, what he brought to the table that I think is a huge positive.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to bring on some more guests, man. And selfishly for that, I just want to hear about like
Other
where
people.
they like who they are, right? Like where they came from and what they're planning to do, how they got there, and all those types of things. So we'll keep the guests rolling, and we'll continue to go live. I did realize, Sam Nang, so I'm going to call myself out here. I don't think I got Friday's episode out, so I was looking at that. So
Okay.
I got it. I'm going to be uploading, but normally it'll be every Monday morning at 6, Friday at 5. So I'm going to get ourselves caught up here. So I'll double drop an episode probably today.
Okay.
Ideal, but
And, for the YouTube banners, I haven't been able to make the updates. All I'm doing is just changing the title. Is that still what you need me to do?
yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine. That's
Okay.
fine.
I'm gonna work on
Ooh,
that today as well too, and then we'll get the title. But one last point about the selfishness and selflessness. I think we've all been talking about this because we all struggle as well too. As like men, like especially men that have like purpose, right? That have like a message that they want to share and stuff, and like the selfishness, like feeling of personal growth of like doing it for yourself first. I struggle with that a lot as well too. It's like, am I doing this out of, should I do it for the other people or for me? It's always you first, because you have to feed yourself first. You have to be at 100%. You have to be very like highly elevated so you can help bring other people as well too. And to me, I struggle with that too. And there was a lot of like struggle going back and forth of like, am I being selfish? Because personal development is naturally, it takes a lot of time. You don't give it to other people unless it matters to what you're working on, like
right.
unnecessary. And I'm not saying anything, but like I had to give up birthday parties and had to give that kind of stuff up, and it felt selfish at those times. Those feelings are like real, and it's gonna come up. So I'm glad that we're really talking about it. That's one of those things I think will get a point across towards like our audience members and stuff, that personal development is not selfish. It's beneficial for everyone, male, female, children's, and everything working on themselves, because we got to bring ourselves, we got to bring 100% best ourselves every day. But yeah, that's my last thing for that I wanted to say. And then I guess we could end the podcast, and we got some more guests lined up as well too. And maybe what we could do is just, if anybody else wants to be a guest on the podcast, let us know. Send us a direct message or a comment on any of our comment, and I'll periodically I ping people and ask them if they would like to be a guest on the show as well too. So we've been getting some good feedback. Danny's got some good people lined up. I got some great people lined up as well too in my network. But other than that, I think that's all I got to say for today.
That's it, man. So yeah, this is FIFO, my boy Sam Nang, Danny Marawinski. New episodes Monday at 6, Friday at 4. Catch it on your commutes. Hoping to inspire and raise the collective vibrations here, and excited to bring on some more guests and hear what they have to offer as well. So thanks for joining, and we will sync back up. You're off this week, right?
Yeah, I'll be off on Friday and Monday. I'll be back the next Friday, or
Okay,
2 Fridays.
cool. I think we have enough to schedule it out, so we'll keep our stuff fresh and live. And I'm gonna work on getting everything scheduled right now, so I don't have to think about it.
Okay, and then I'll work on getting some folks lined up, or I'll put a guest calendar together just so we can have a visual or an idea of like who we're gonna have.
Yeah, and we should probably sync up on this. Maybe we could chat later this week about like some strategy around who we want to bring on, because I have a lot of folks
Yeah.
that we can bring on too that would be more than happy to jump on and share their successes. So I think we want to just kind of get an idea of like the mixed bag of who do we have in our networks that's
Okay.
we could bring on as guests.
Do you want to end the podcast and then we could
Yeah.
do